ladies and gentlemen, Greg Nicotero.
I'm tired. I'm exhausted after watching that.
I didn't know you did Splice.
What's that?
I didn't know you did Splice. It's a measure of how many films you've done. That I was looking at those movies thinking, you did that, and you did that, and you did that.
Yeah, it's 800 movies, I think, since 1988. When K&B started, I actually started in Pittsburgh with George Romero, the brilliant George Romero, in 1984. So it's been almost 30 years.
Now, we're going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then we have a special guest to make the presentation. Growing up, did you know you were destined to become a horror icon or a horror legend?
You know, it's funny, I emailed Frank Darabont, and I said, hey, I'm going to London, and I'm getting an award, and this is exciting. And he said, oh, so you're really old, aren't you? He said, you're a legend, then you're old. I was like, wait a second. You know, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and probably 20 minutes away from the cemetery where they shot Night of the Living Dead. And I found myself watching Super 8 movies of all the classic horror stuff, and Chiller Theater, which was the local TV affiliate. And I just loved it. You know, it was a hobby, like so many people that I've met outside, and a lot of people. You start doing this as a hobby. You never imagine when you're 10, 11, 12 years old that it's going to become your career. You just think, oh, this is something I love, and I want to invest in it. So for me, it was Jaws, Dawn of the Dead, War of the Worlds, The Time Machine, you know, the originals, of course. So it was something that just sparked my imagination. And in Pittsburgh, there were two people you needed to meet in order to get into the movie business. One was George Romero, and one was Tom Savini. So I happened to become friends with George, and next thing I knew was friends with Tom. And when Day of the Dead came up, they just called and said, hey, so we're doing Day of the Dead. Do you want a job? And I'm like, hold that thought. I'll be right back. And literally rushed home. I think I got a speeding ticket on my way home to inform my parents that I was going to take a slight detour from my pre-med career. I kind of, which is true. I figured the fake blood would be more rewarding than the real blood. So ironically, it was almost as simple as that.
So did you have an experience in this field at all?
I didn't. You know, I mean, I had sculpted when I was younger, and I drew. I took art classes when I was in high school and even in college a little bit. But I never imagined that it would become this. You know, I mean, I'm such a fan of the genre, and I love it that if I wasn't sitting here, I would be sitting probably in that guy's seat right there. So it's rewarding for me, and you know, coming up on 28 years. I think what keeps it fresh and what keeps it exciting for me is I'm watching these shows as a fan. You know, when I watch The Walking Dead, I watch it, I put on the screen what I would want to see because I love the genre so much, and that gives me the ability to keep it fresh, and I think that's why people keep watching.
You mentioned certain key films as being very influential in your life, like films like Jaws and the original Thing. I mean, what do you think it is about those movies that influence so many other people as well?
Well, you know, what I love about special effects and makeup, and this is something that I kind of just realized in the last couple of weeks, which is in the late 70s and early 80s when you had The Howling and American Werewolf in London and Dawn of the Dead and all that was sort of the heyday for makeup effects guys. We all had long hair and we all loved Van Halen, and you know, we were kind of thought we were really, really cool and tried to pick up girls, and sorry, honey. That was sort of, there was this weird persona that came along with doing special effects makeup. But what I didn't realize is because the makeup effects were sort of pushed to the forefront of those movies, it attracted young filmmakers like Robert Rodriguez and Guillermo del Toro and Alex Aja and Eli Roth and Quentin and all those guys. Because what happened was a lot of those guys started out wanting to do makeup effects. And it's a huge compliment, and I feel like we're all sort of cut out of the same cloth. You know, I kind of joke around that somebody threw a big chunk of meat with a hook in it and threw it out into the water, and all of us grabbed onto it, and it's wherever we let go, which is where our career path took. And you know, you can talk to Sam Raimi or Frank Darabont, and we will all talk passionately about Ray Harryhausen and passionately about Hammer horror and all that kind of stuff. because we all loved the genre. And some guys decided to do effects, and some guys became writers, and some guys became directors. But I really do believe that if it hadn't have been for Ray Harryhausen, and it hadn't have been for the fact that the Hammer horror movies were a little sexier and a little gorier, that sort of stoked the imagination of a lot of guys my age and younger.
Well, to take you back, Day of the Dead, that was your first movie, I believe, in terms of effects. What can you remember about the production, and particularly those two guys, Savini and George?
Well, you know, what was interesting for me on Day of the Dead was I sort of created this job description that didn't exist. I was like the assistant to Tom Savini, so I was his coordinator. The producers loved it because it allowed him to sort of step off and be free to design the effects, and I sort of coordinated the department. Okay, we need 18 zombies today, we need 20 tomorrow, and but you know, all of us were I mean, I was the oldest guy on the crew aside from Tom Savini, and I was 20 years old. The youngest guy was Everett Burrell, who was 18. So you had a bunch of guys between 18 and 20 who were geeking out every day that they were working on Day of the Dead. We'd be like, so what do you think, they'll make a sequel to Evil Dead? Oh yeah, I don't know, maybe. But you think Ash will be in it? I mean, like, those were the conversations we would have. Or you'd sit there and you'd be like, okay, so if you could go back in time and work on Creature from the Black Lagoon or King Kong or This Island Earth, those were the conversations. It wasn't like, oh my God, did you see that chick? She's hot. We would talk about like what nerdy movie we could go back in time and work on. So you just, at that time in our lives, when we were young and impressionable, we just fed off that excitement. You know, there's a documentary that played earlier called Nightmare Factory, and I got approached by Donna Davies, the producer, director, and she said, you know, all this behind-the-scenes footage you guys shot, no one's ever seen it. So she actually took a lot of it and cut it together into a little sort of story about, you know, where I grew up and how I got into the business. And it's funny because it plays up that whole like moving to LA in the 80s and having long hair and all that goofy stuff. But what I was excited about was it really did capture that time in movie making, and the fact that every movie was trying to top the special effects of the movie before. And it certainly changed filmmaking, because back then the movies were about the effects. Now I make a very conscious effort to make sure that the effects are integrated, and especially on Walking Dead, now that I have an opportunity to be involved creatively, you can't stop the movie to showcase the special effect, which is fine, but it really has to serve the story, and that's something that is very, very important.
Well, you plugged into the horror network pretty damn quickly. Was that because, you know, you knew who to target, or did people come to you?
You know, we've been doing it a long time, and we get a lot of, fortunately, we get a lot of great repeat business. You know, I mean, we've done all of Quentin's movies. I mean, I still have one of the ears from Reservoir Dogs. And it was, the deal was, he said, listen, we're doing this little movie. Originally, it was going to be like $35,000, and Quentin and his friends were all going to star in it. And then Lawrence Bender gave the script to Harvey Keitel, and then it became a little over $1 million. But I think we made $800, $1,000. We didn't make any money on it. It was just, you know, hey, can you help us out? We need an ear and we need some blood. I'm like, okay, sure. And who would have ever known? You know, so a lot of times when we get calls from people saying, hey, I got this little movie, you know, I always remember. I'll never forget seeing Reservoir Dogs for the first time and calling Quentin and saying, that's why I moved out here, to be able to work on a film like that just had such a vision. And you know, one of the things that I love about my job is I continue to learn every day. When we wrapped the season 2 of Walking Dead last year, I literally went directly on to Django. It was like I left set, and like within 2 weeks I was shooting Django Unchained. And the exciting part was learning about directing. I had directed on Walking Dead, so I was able to step back and go, okay, I can't go up to a director and say, okay, we're shooting this scene in 6 months, and a guy gets his arm chopped off. So which arm is it, and where does he get chopped off? And I was able to step back and design the effects from a director's standpoint, and by doing so, it allowed the director the freedom to shoot the scene the way he wanted to. And it was a great part of learning what I do. And when people come up and say, I want to do special effects and I want to learn how to do this or learn how to do that, you know, the number one key thing that you have to be able to do is be creative on set and allow the director to be, to let things grow organically when your actors come in and the way it works. So.
Well, you have a very interesting career in that you've worked with the past masters of horror in terms of their sort of 70s and 80s, and also a new breed. Does that give you a unique perspective? Having worked with like Wes Craven and Raimi, as well as Rodriguez and those kind, the guys that came later, so to speak.
Well, I think it's all about inspiration. I mean, when I worked on Book of Eli, the Hughes brothers were like, we wanted to do makeup effects, and we sort of got into writing and directing. And I think having worked with George and Wes Craven and John Carpenter and John Landis, who are literally the guys who laid the entire groundwork. I mean, if you really think about the fact that if American Werewolf in London or The Howling or The Thing had never been made, then I don't know where the genre would be right now. It's those movies that sort of elevated cinema at that time. But everybody's trying to top themselves. And again, when I was younger, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have access to the stuff that people today have access to. So to be a fan of the genre, you had to work at it. You had to find Famous Monsters magazine. You had to find this book or that book. You really had to work at it. Now it's a lot easier to be a genre fan because you can just type it in and it's there and everything you would ever want. So I think that had a lot to do with guys like myself and guys like Frank Darabont and people, because we really had to dig to find that kind of material and that kind of stuff. And by doing that, you're committed to it, and you can ask me anything about the making of Jaws. I just took my family to Martha's Vineyard and made my kids go swimming in the beach where Alex Kittner got eaten. And I'm like, hey, remember that scene with the kids on the raft? Well, that happened right there. My 10-year-old was like, really? Are you out of your effing mind bringing me here? So,
is there anyone you haven't been able to work with? I mean, you've ticked a lot of boxes in that time.
Sorry, what?
Is there anyone you haven't been able to work with? Because you've just mentioned a very impressive roll call of names.
I've been really, really fortunate. I've worked with everyone that I've really wanted to work with. The first time I met Spielberg, I was working on Amistad, and I brought my Jaws script, and I stuck it in my backpack, and I'm just thinking, I just want to just get him to sign my script because I'm a giant nerd, and I was really excited about it. And the scene we were shooting was, there's a big revolt on the boat, and all the slaves get free, and they kill all the guys on the boat, and they had this gigantic boat built on a huge gimbal with water tanks, and it was really amazing. It was in Van Nuys Airport. It was gigantic. So we're standing there, and I'm talking to Steven, and my friend who was the makeup guy saw me talking to Steven and went and snuck my script out of my backpack and walked up and said, hey, Steven, Greg's a big Jaws fan, and would you mind signing this? And so we spent 20 minutes talking about Jaws, and so later in the night, he said, hey, I have an idea. There's a scene where they throw a guy up against the one of the sails, and they're going to stab him and cut him, and I want to see blood shoot through the sail. And so can you go up with your little blood thing? And I'm like, sure. So I climb up the ladder, and there's this big, huge set, and I'm standing there with my little blood pump, all pumped up, ready to go. I'm like, Steven Spielberg wants me to shoot blood. This is going to be awesome. And I turn and I look behind me, and there's like a 300-gallon water tank right over my head. And I hear them go, ready and action. I'm like, this is not going to be good. So there's me with my little hose going, and 300 gallons of water just washed me right off the deck into the lower part. And so I came down, so they yelled cut, and I came down, and I was literally like, in the cartoons, like drowned rat with like my whiskers are all bent, and I walked out, and I was like, oh, was it good? Was it good? And he looked over and he went, yeah, it was great. It looked great. Meanwhile, I just think that he sort of forgot that I was there, and I'm spraying, going, this is gonna be great. And I just washed away. But I would have done. But you know what? I would have done it again in a minute if the director goes, okay, that didn't quite work. Take two. Go back up there, and I'd be like, okay, that'll be fun.
I thought you were going to say that you had a part as an extra, because you do have a little bit of an acting career. Is that
I'm a terrible actor, though. I mean, let's just get it out right now. I just happened to sort of weasel my way. When we did From Dusk Till Dawn, I had really, really long hair, and Robert Rodriguez was like, I need you and Tom Savini in a scene together. And I went, okay. So ironically, it's a scene where I pull a knife on him, and then he pulls his penis gun on me, and I run away scared. And the funniest part is, so like the next day, Robert comes up and says, oh, so we got to kill you because you're in the room. So we're going to do a scene with you and Salma Hayek. And I'm like, yeah, this is not going to be good either. So literally the scene is I'm sitting there with like a big blood tube and blood spurting out of my neck. And she walks over and sits on my lap and sort of looks longingly into my eyes, and then in the unrated cut, it might be on the DVD, I'm not sure, her head, mouth opens and her head turns into this big reptile and chomps my head off and kills me. So we shot, like an hour before lunch of her just walking over in the purple bikini, sitting on my lap, and I'm like, And then they go, okay, cut, that's lunch. And I'm like, I think we need one more. Can we just, Solomon, no, that didn't work for me. And it's not even in the, I don't even think I know it's not in the movie, but when we were doing the audio commentary, I think I saw like a rough version of it. And then, of course, my dad saw it and was like, holy shit, who was that girl? And I said, well, Dad, I did a whole scene with her, and they cut it out. It didn't even make it, but she signed a picture and said, thanks for your first love scene on camera, which I have is a little black and white. It's a little frame. So. Sorry, again, my wife's going to... Hi, honey.
So what is it about Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino that you keep going back and they keep going back to you? I mean, is this... What's going on in that working relationship?
It's, I just... it's a shared brain scenario. I really believe, one of the things I love about Quentin is we were working on Django, and he came over and he goes, dude, and I've been waiting for him like 2 weeks to give me some feedback on some of the effects. And he goes, I got to talk to you. And I go, all right. He goes, I have an idea for a movie. And I go, okay. So he pitches this awesome exploitation retro 1970s horror movie to me. And he's like, you should direct it. We're going to put this movie together. It's going to be great. I go, oh, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Every day for the next 2 months, we'd be on set, and Jamie Foxx is there, and Christoph is there, and James Raymar, and all the actors are there, and Don Johnson. And it was funny because I'm standing there talking to Quentin about with something. And Don Johnson's being very courteous, and he's waiting to step in and talk to the director. All Quentin wanted to talk about was this awesome exploitation movie that he had this great idea for. So there's a passion and there's a love that these guys have. And they're so dramatically different filmmakers, which is why them collaborating is great. I have a great T-shirt that Rodriguez, it was on Grindhouse, and it was a yellow shirt, and it was like, digital technology is the future of cinema, Robert Rodriguez. And underneath it says, fuck digital, Quentin Tarantino. And it's just funny because they're such different filmmakers, and Quentin embraces his actors, and it's so organic the way he works. And it really, it's just, I can't describe it. I'm humbled by having the opportunity to collaborate with both of them, and with Frank Darabont. I'll never forget, we were shooting The Green Mile, and there's a scene we're doing a makeup test on Tom Hanks' wife who is dying, and we did real subtle prosthetics on her, and we walk out and Frank's like, I don't know, it needs a little heinous horror hag, which is Sam Raimi's quote for every Evil Dead Deadite in the world. And Frank says it like in the room full of people. I'm like, I got it. I know exactly what. And I just love that he's like, a little heinous horror hag here. I could just see like a mix of few parts of this and a little heinous horror hag and a little that. So.
Well, when you're being so creative all the time, is it possible to look back and have favourites or other things, effects you like more than others? Is there one thing that you have a special sort of regard for? Mickey Rourke's makeup in Sin City, I love. It was thanks. He's a great actor, and one of the challenges is when we first got that job, I had dinner with Frank Miller and Robert, and they were like, listen, Mickey's got a great face. We don't want to change it too much, so let's just sort of ease into this. So we sculpted 5 different makeups, one of them as subtle as just a little bridge of the nose. And we sculpted all these makeups, and then they came to the shop and we did the first test. And Frank Miller said, no, here's the deal. These are great, but it doesn't feel like Marv to me. So he did this drawing, quick sketch. And he sort of made this semicircle and brought the chin in and brought the nose out, and he goes, that's Marv. And I was like, I get it, it's great. So it was an hour and 20 minutes makeup every day, and it was challenging because we had to put a wig on him and put the brows on. But what was exciting is that he made that character. The first time he stepped on set, he had the white T-shirt on and the black leather jacket and the black leather pants. And he walked on set, and Frank Miller was like, shit, like literally wanted to back away. And the funniest thing is, I have a quick cameo in Sin City. There's a scene where they're going into Goldie's club, and there's a guy that's getting beat up, and then he gets thrown out of the club, and then Marv walks and steps on his nuts and then walks over him. And Robert's like, you should be that guy. I'm like, wait a second. Why do I have to get stepped on my nuts? Why can't he do it? But it's just, I was laying on the ground, you know, I'd get smashed, my head smashed into the wall, and I roll over and I see Mickey walking towards me. I'm like, but it was fine. But I'm really proud of it. You know, listen, I mean, Sin City was a great experience. You know, but I have to say, Walking Dead, what I love is that it's been 28 years that I've been doing makeup effects, and to have people come up and go, the zombies in that show are fantastic and we love what you do. That fuels me. That makes me want to make them even better every time, because if the fans are responding to it, that means we're doing something right. So.
Well, I imagine you make lots of friends in the makeup chair, and we have one of them here tonight to present the award, Mr. Simon Pegg.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, everybody. I'm sat over there with Greg's wife, Shari, and I know she's very proud of him, because I heard her say, under her breath as Greg was talking, "Fuck Selma Hayek."
Really?
You didn't really, did you? Sweet. My first inclination of Greg was back in 1986 when I hired Day of the Dead on VHS, and he was one of Rhodes's goons. I didn't even know him as a makeup artist then. You were one of those pot-smoking goons, and then ended up as a head on a table in Frankenstein's lab, you know, when they pull the thing off, and it's this goldfishing kind of animatronic head, which was you, right?
Yep.
And I didn't know that, you know, 20 years later, he would be one of my best friends in the world. So I'm very proud today to be able to come up here and present him with this award. He's a legend, and you know, yes, you are old, but just live with it. But I think you've earned the right to stand alongside the likes of Savini, you know, who was your mentor, and Dick Smith and Rob Bottin and all those guys, and Rick Baker, and you know, you've totally earned it. And I've skipped forward a few years to the first screening of Shaun of the Dead at the San Diego Comic-Con in 2004. Edgar Wright came up to me and said, "Greg Nicotero's here with Ken Foree, who was Peter in the original Dawn," and we completely nerded out because we had, you know, a couple of our heroes in the audience, and we were introduced afterwards and introduced to some people that were just like us. They were just film fans, particularly Greg, not Ken. Ken's a big movie star. But you know, and have since sort of become friends, and our kids are friends, and it's a lovely thing to meet your heroes and find them to be wonderful, wonderful people. What I'd really like to just before we give Greg the award to say is that I love how Greg has evolved the zombie as a screen creature. As a fan of zombies myself, to go from those sort of monochromatic ghouls in Night of the Living Dead, which of course you were a child when that was made, but then you visited set on Dawn, right? You did get to... Yeah.
I did.
And years later, after the premiere of Land of the Dead, which Edgar Wright and myself had a little cameo in, and were made up by Greg, which is another nerdgasm moment for us, we went on a little tour of the Evans City Cemetery and the Monroeville Mall, and we walked through the back of the boiler room, and that noise, that sort of whine, is still there. It's crazy. It's amazing. But right through those sort of greenish, bluey things, which you had nothing to do with, to those sort of Cro-Magnon kind of zombies in Day of the Dead, right through to the sort of Land of the Dead, they become something more, to that fucking half-woman in the first episode of Walking Dead. It's such an evolution, and Greg's been such a part of that. So as a fan of zombies, and I'm sure there's a lot of zombie fans in the audience, I think we owe him a debt of gratitude just for that, to have made them so, you know... Yes. So it is with huge pleasure and no little pride that I present this award to Mr. Gregory Nicotero.
You didn't know that was my full name.
I didn't realize you were a Gregory. This Variety FrightFest Award 2012. This lifetime achievement. I'm sorry you have to die tonight.
So right.
In order to qualify for the award.
Honey, just take my keys. That'll be fine.
I'll look after Shari.
Hey, wait.
She's cute. Come on.
All right.
Sir?
Yes.
Proud.
I'm going to take the box. Thank you.
Greg Nicotero.
I like that it looks like a shark tooth. Thanks, Simon.
My pleasure.
Buddy boy. I just want to thank FrightFest and Variety Magazine. This is a joy for me. I mean, I get to share with you guys what I love to do and share with everyone here. So it means a tremendous amount to me. So thank you very much. Okay.